special episode of Common Mansplaining. Judy is here with us today. I am out here dedicated to TLC's Left Eye Lopez from my had a little shaving accident, but it's as afflictions that are common to man. Here in Common Mansplaining, you're going to get the truth, common sense, common sense, where we try to see through the spin, where everyday people, we're not elites, are going to break down the stories and how they apply to us in the news. So thank you for watching. Please, as always, like, subscribe. We're happy to have any of your comments, questions, and if you have something you really want us to comment on, feel free to send us a super chat. But if you have a good question, we will be able to respond. So welcome again to Common Mansplaining. So it's been a couple of weeks, Judy, that you were on, and we talked about two-tier justice and how when the justice system is applied in any way that's either perceived to be corrupt or perceived to be different for one class of people or one type of people than another, that creates that lack of trust, just that environment, that vibe, so to speak, can lead to very unhealthy outcomes. And so a follow-up to that topic, I just wanted to follow up really briefly. Just today, I believe, yes, in D.C., Washington, D.C., the case that really started the whole D.C. crackdown, that made Trump take over D.C. policing and bring in the National Guard, was one of the Doge employees with a rather sort of explicit nom de plume, Pelotas es grande, maybe, right? He was on a date, and the woman he was on a date with got attacked. Okay. She found my joke a little funny there, right?
Good translation.
Good translation, yes.
Yeah.
Well, she was carjacked. He tried to stop the carjacking and was brutally beaten up. Very bloodied, left in this parking lot after the fact. And the police really weren't doing anything. And Trump was really quite incensed about it. And that led to his whole push to have the 30 days of National Guard coming in to take over DC and really shaking things up and set off a thing which now he's talked about doing in other cities. Right now, it's just been protecting federal agencies, but he's talked about using federal troops in a way like he did in DC. The impetus for all of this was this attack. Well, those assailants who attacked him went before a judge today, and the judge let them off with just probation, no jail time. Okay. And so a lot of people in DC, I would like to say both on the left, are kind of incensed about this. It's also, they feel like it's a racial thing because the judge was a black woman and the assailants were black, that they didn't come down hard on them. She said that they were teenagers, so that none of their names or their information has not been made public because of that. But it creates this feeling like that they could get away with it, that there's no really lasting consequences, which is the type of environment that lawlessness that Trump is using to justify federal law enforcement, other claims, things that you've told to me, are very troubling to you. Trump using the National Guard in cities and urban settings is a trend that you're not in favor of. So now we've had this case where it's sort of like what we talked about, where the law has been extremely liberally applied. Not quite dismissal, but essentially no consequences other than probation until they turn 18 for these people that carried out this carjacking attack on a government employee. What are some of your thoughts? You might not have read up on it today, but some of your thoughts about that and some of the broader implications.
Yeah, I'm generally aware of the case, and I wasn't aware that the sentencing was today or the outcome of it. But I guess I'll say, like, um, I mean, if you're talking about, like, there was an attack on a government employee, like, the fact that this person was a government employee, has no real bearing on anything because, like, we're talking about not having different levels of justice based on, like,
Mhm.
who you are or what you
Yes,
are.
for sure.
So,
Yeah.
yeah, but on the
It
other
made it a media story. It made the story have wider appeal.
yeah, yeah, and so I guess the other thing though is that, like, you want people to be able to feel like they can go to work and do their jobs without risking their lives. On the other hand, you want people to not fall into a pattern of a justice system that will keep pulling you in after, like, over and over again. Like I said, I'm not sure what considerations this judge had. Being teenagers is a big one. Because I know people who've been to juvenile detention, and like it real like, the people I know who've been there have really been changed by the experience for the worse, I would say. And so, I would say, like, they went from being, like, run of the mill, just kinda, like, foolish foolish guys, really. I only know guys who went, but, to being, like, they're in there, like, having to fight and scrap with other people and stuff like that, with, like, people that are much more criminalized than them sometimes. And so, like, they're having to learn how to deal with actual criminals, and then they come out and, like, so they graffiti or something like that. And the carjacking is not graffiti, granted, but,
Yeah.
like, it's just I'm not sure where I would come down on that particular situation. I would say, if there's any alternative to incarceration, like, that's going to be effective, and I guess that's the key. Like, if
Yeah.
if if it's actually effective, if these kids walk away and they say, "You know what? That could have turned out so much worse. We're never gonna do something like that again. Like, let's just stay on the good side."
Well,
Like, that's one thing. But if it's seen
mhm.
as like, "Oh, there's no consequences for doing anything, so go back and just do whatever you want," that's the opposite of what you really want.
Yeah.
So,
But
yeah.
well, all right. I mean, here are the factors. I mean, this had been going on for a long time. This wasn't isolated. Like the number of and it was specifically minors, right? They could be coming either living in DC or living, just outside DC. We're coming there specifically because it was known that if they got caught, there would be no consequences as long as they're under 18, no serious consequences. That the DC justice system would be very lenient, if not dismiss their case. Yeah, bring nothing. This was sort of understood, and so it was leading to a rise in criminality. This is right what sort of Trump. Now I understand. Yeah, judges have to judge the situations, and we she knows more about these young men than I do, and maybe felt like maybe that they were not hardened criminals and that they could overcome this. But this being a very high profile case, everyone watching, right? She knew this would be reported on, right?
Yeah. Well,
And would be scrutinized. Would that change anything?
I'll say this about it though, like, judges have, their own political careers to look after, and
Mhm.
that's what I feel like. I'm a little cynical about, like, was it good, was it bad?
Yeah,
It
it
is
was
what it is,
political.
and
Yeah.
it's political. Like, she's making herself employable, for the next, person who might be doing more appointing or something like that. I feel like that's a lot of what goes into these.
Okay. Well, the judges are elected too at that level, district level judges. Yeah. So,
Yeah, these
yeah,
sort of extreme interpretations of things, it's like everybody's doing a little grandstanding for their side.
yeah. But this type of thing is not going to um, make the Republicans or Trump feel like he needs to have less scrutiny on the district's crime. He's
Right.
going to keep his eye on that,
They're
and
gonna yeah.
yeah, and we there have been a lot of reports. The public officials don't like it, or at least didn't like the imposition. But that kind of quieted down. The mayors thank Trump. The word on the street from people that live there is that they've appreciated the atmosphere of um, generally less criminality, certainly more and just the idea that if somebody commits a crime, that resources will be put into trying to solve it, and
Yeah.
and so that just sort of generally discourages, um, right, juvenile sort of bored criminal behavior,
Yeah.
which is right, can be very easily sort of socially peer pressured into it and peer pressured out of it. So
Yeah.
anyway, but we would hope that this doesn't lead to vigilantes or people feeling like they have to be armed and they have to that if they're victimized, there's no justice that they're going to feel like, and they have to act out in more violent ways. That's the
Right. And so
worst case scenario.
that's where it can go also. And so hopefully, like, the judges who make such decisions are keeping that in mind too. Like, it's the feeling that people have. Are they going to have to set up their own security patrols? Are they going to have to um have armed guards with them who just shoot on sight or something like that,
Yeah,
like, which would be a terrible outcome. And so
yeah,
it's always a question of balance. It's
yeah,
and judges hopefully consider the balance of society as well.
yeah, yeah. The message it sends not just to these men, but to other people, right? Is
Yeah.
right when certain acts are antisocial, right? Then make it right? So it's not just like they beat up this one person, right, in a vacuum. They create an environment where everyday people, common people, feel less safe to go to a gas station late at night, or you use the services in their neighborhood, right? So
Yeah.
those type of antisocial acts, that's when the judge needs to instruct them. This is more than you just beating up some guy, right, in a gas station. This has a effect out for the whole community, and as such, you should feel the weight of that. And anyway, yeah. So right now, it's feeling like the consequences are insufficient, but maybe there's more to come. Maybe there's more to the story. But that's just something we're watching. But speaking of armed guards and of people acting out, yesterday was Charlie Kirk Day. It was a national day of remembrance for him because it was his birthday. So rather than celebrating the day that he was murdered, they chose to celebrate his birthday. Trump awarded him posthumously a Presidential Medal of Freedom. His
Yeah,
wife
I think I
received
was
it.
aware of that. I didn't know it was like Charlie Kirk Day.
Yeah,
I
I mean the
like,
banks weren't closed or anything like that, but it was at least at the White House. He received the Presidential Medal of Freedom
yeah.
and recognized him. And this is again is something that relevance to the common man and relevance to you and I. Charlie Kirk was, while he had a much larger platform than common mansplaining, um, he was just trying to engage people in conversation. He had no real power. He did not have any elected office. It was all just influence and ideas, and he was saying ideas that were controversial in a setting where he on college campuses where he knew there would be pushback or his ideas wouldn't be welcome. So he was engaging in a place where there would be a contentious debate. And I can defend all of his methods or everything he said, wasn't that, but that America has long should be a place where doing that, whether the ideas are popular or inflammatory or unpopular, should not make you a target for violence for just using words. And and I
Yeah.
know, but when we've talked about how doing the show, that type of concern is a very real thing that is not a non-zero factor even living in the community that you live in.
Yeah, so I think these days to be able to publicly make controversial statements is like I mean, if we're talking about cojones, like that's that's what it takes. I think it's to publicly put yourself out there because I think one of the problems is it's just so easy to find where anybody is anymore. So like it's easy to just pick a target, out of random and figure out where they are. And so the fact that I mean, I guess it's like we would have to come up with a new standard as like a society for what speech is going to be allowed, because we talked really briefly about the Young Republicans, and I'm not going to really bring that up here because I actually don't know that much
Mhm.
about it. But I think like some of the statements that I've seen them having made. Now you could imagine somebody joking and saying like I love Hitler, and that's gonna like go viral now, right? Because I just said that. But anyway, like
Yeah.
somebody's
Out
gonna
of
like,
context. Yeah.
yeah, right, like completely out of context, but they're making a joke because like they're the sort of person that everybody who knows them knows that they would never love Hitler. Like,
Yeah.
that they're like the most anti like Hitler, you know,
Yeah.
Holocaust survivor grandparents
Yeah.
person alive. But they're like, yay, or something like that. And
They
then
say
like,
like Hitler is me homo or something like, some joke, and they're like,
yeah, so it's like and so like when I've seen this reported, it's like, okay, I see that these seem like really bad things, and maybe they are really bad things. So I'm not dismissing that possibility. Like maybe these were like statements made in a genuine context of like people supporting these statements and stuff. But it also could have been like just a collection of people who are like, this is what people think Republicans are like. And wouldn't that be
yeah.
funny if that was the context? So anyway, like I've known I when everything wasn't recorded and everything wasn't like digitally perpetual the way it is now, like it was like you could have some crazy off the wall conversations that like you just are like, oh, I really hope nobody's like recording this now.
Mhm.
Um so yeah, and so like it's like you have to be like so much more aware that what you say can and will be used against you. And
Well,
then
right. I would call that sort of elite privilege, right? So the elites, they live in, you know, gated communities, or maybe have security teams, or have the money to afford security, different things like that. They're harder to get to, right? Now they have the privilege where they can express their opinions and not have to worry about this type of thing, right? Well, in America, it should be the common man and woman should feel free to have the same platform, the same privilege to express their opinions on government, on social norms, on environment, on on everything,
well,
and not
yeah, I
right.
don't know.
But the elites, right, they want to hold that for themselves, right?
I think that's a yeah, so I see what you're saying, and also I say to myself sometimes, like, does everybody deserve to be able to express their opinion anywhere
Oh,
they want
interesting.
to all the time? Like, that's a question I ask myself. Like, should I be able to like interrupt a government meeting to like take the microphone and express my opinion? Or, like it's like
Mhm.
when is it I think like most things we should lower the bar of accountability for a lot of like social media conversations for one thing. But like I think it's like if you're when you're like a person who's getting paid like $250,000 a year to make official statements, what you say is official and you should be held accountable. But for most people,
Mhm.
I think like it's like, well, it would be fine to say I didn't appreciate the statement you made, and then have a discussion about it. We don't have to shoot people.
Yeah,
um you know we don't have to, but I mean it comes from an idea that like saying things or not saying things is causes actual violence. And but then the only people who like have protection against that, yes, are people who can like afford themselves like $70,000 a year security.
yeah,
um
or live in gated, secluded communities, things like that. Yeah, where they're cordoned off from that. But yeah, I understand you have to have law and order. And I think deserve is an interesting word. Now we certainly, according to the Constitution, have the right. The government cannot penalize us
right,
for
sure,
what
yeah,
we say, right?
but
Now
citizens
there's a time and a place to say that, right? Obviously, I can't just go walking into a session of Congress not as a congressman and expect to be heard the equivalent of a congressman without being invited there, right? Um, but here certainly, like in our public square, right, which is what social media is nowadays, the public square. I have every right to give my ideas. Now, you know,
I
right.
suppose
People have a right to disagree with that and express their opinions against me, but it shouldn't be a privilege. I think the government should be actively um, making sure that the safety of people to express their ideas is an important part of upholding the First Amendment. Right? If we just
I
say
don't think
if
that's
there's
it.
speech we don't allow, we allow people to target violence against those people, and we won't do anything about it.
So
Right?
violence
That.
is a different thing. Yeah, sure,
Mhm.
but, like, I don't think anybody, like, has a right to, like, like, the First Amendment's really clear that it's that you can say something about the government. Like, it's not like you can say like, you can't you speech cannot speech is there's a really wide capacity for what is allowable speech in this country,
Mhm.
guaranteed by the First Amendment. So as far as like social media being the public square, I'm not sure like that's sort of like a like do we really get to treat it like that or not? Because it's not. It's corporate for one thing. Like there's no we're not citizens who have made up our own network that people have joined. And second of all, like government intervention to make sure that everybody like gets their say on X or whatever is government intervention.
Well,
So
no,
it's like,
not government intervention. Everybody gets their say, but that
from who though?
um,
Like
violent
as
threats,
a part of
violent.
the
If somebody were to make violent threats against somebody for just making social media, right? I'm going to kill you because of your opinion. So the government would, in some way, like,
yeah, but
if somebody made a threat to you in our video
that's
today,
already a
you could
threat.
if
That's
you took
already an
that. Sorry,
offense.
sorry, just a minute. If
Yes.
somebody per se made a threat in the comment section today, and you took it to the local police, right, agency or whatever, you would hope
Yeah.
they would do something and not just be like, we don't have time for this. You're being delusional or whatever and throw it out. You'd expect them to at least, investigate it, maybe send something to that person and say, hey, we noticed you send this. If you act, we're watching this, anything happens to this person, you're going to be a suspect or whatever. A
Right.
minimal level of something, if threats are credibly made against people for speech. We would hope.
That's already the case.
Okay.
But it is already the case. I mean, it's the case that you can go to the police and say, like, somebody's making a threat against my life.
Mhm.
Here are the details. I
Mhm.
mean, like, that's
But as long as the police treats it credibly, like they don't just say like, oh, we're not doing anything. If they, follow up a little bit, even if they can't fully imprison a person for statements, they can follow up and say, we saw these threatening statements you're making, and you're being, if you make any aggressive action against this person, you know, you'll be the suspect. You won't get away with it, kind of thing.
yeah, but I believe that would already be the case, and I'll just say, like, even in cases of domestic violence where, there's the history and it's known and you know, like, who exactly is making the threats and what exactly they're trying to do, like, these things still they can't, like, surround you with a security detail, and
That's true.
so, it happens all the time that,
Yeah.
like a husband or an ex-husband or a boyfriend kills a wife or whatever because it's a known threat. It was known it was going to be happen. It happened in a very wealthy neighborhood like beside where I used to live not that long ago, and it was known, and it's just like just how far can you extend the police state in this case,
Yeah,
like.
that's true. I mean, Rand Paul had his neighbor attack him, right? And he was a U.S. senator. So, I mean, it's some things that we do sort of have to be brave and sort of accept there's a certain level of risk, but that we at Common Mansplaining would, say it's not just the elites. Everyone should not live in fear if they're expressing their opinions and should be brave. That Charlie Kirk, the lesson to the right was don't be a silent majority. Don't be intimidated by people. If you have an opinion, even if it's if it's not in line with orthodoxy, or if it's going to be contentious or upset people, you should still get it out there and let people know that that's an authentic opinion, and not just be coward or intimidated away from it. And I think that's why Charlie Kirk has inspired a lot of people, at least on the right, to not
Also,
just be a silent majority.
and you know what else though too? I think it's created a monster of sorts that the left would be sorry that they participated in any way, because I have heard there have been just like over 100,000 applications for Turning Point USA chapters, like in colleges and high schools and stuff. Um, the like I guess the younger generations, at least who leaned conservative, like really like took it to heart that that this happened, and they're really taking it as a clarion call. And so I think if anything, it's the likely outcome will be that the younger generations will be quite a bit more conservative, and like be more interested in these things, than if he had just, he had a short career, it kind of fizzled out, he went on to other things like people do, and it changed the nature of it.
Yeah, I have a sister-in-law who was, I think she's 24, 25, never been political, anything at all, and after that, like, yeah, she volunteered at Turning Point USA, and
Yeah.
was, and was setting up chairs or just walking around in a MAGA hat, which I've never done. I don't have the cojones to wear a MAGA hat, and she's wearing this MAGA hat, and I'm like, wow. Right. So this thing, yeah, young people were fired up by this and felt
Yeah.
like, that. So again, yeah, I think the assassination of Charlie Kirk will have ripples of effect for years and years to come, and we'll see that. Now, the other topic, also on the realm of violent speech, is that my religious community was targeted recently with some violence, a random attack. Um, I'm a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, and had somebody who disagreed with the teachings of that church and the religious philosophies of that church, and believed that they were to such a point that they were dangerous, that people needed to be violently eradicated, exterminated. And he was the one to do it. Drove a truck into a building in in Michigan, set it on fire, and personally killed several members there. This is pretty shocking to our community. I have not commented on it on this channel yet, because I didn't want to be emotional about it, um, or have feelings of anger. Try to get some distance from it. It is right. I'm not at all like the hundreds of years of pogroms and type of persecution and violence that Jews have had, but it is still in America. It's still shocking to see people just worshiping in a church attacked out of the blue by somebody, simply because their interpretation and practice of Christianity, or the practice of the faith, is different from someone's. I mean, this is 2025. How is this happening? Um, and so, do you feel like that there is something that we can do, as a common man, to help be peacemakers, to help spread a culture where peace, um, despite our religious differences, is, yeah, I guess, an even stronger ideal than it is now. I feel like it's an expectation in our culture, but maybe not. What do you think?
Okay, so I think that you and I both grew up in a very fortunate time where this was not a common thing. And I think that the country tends to right itself, but I think it's, I hate to say this, I think it has to hit like a point where people have to be outraged. Latter-day Saints is a religious minority. Jews in this country, a religious minority. Even like, Muslims are a religious minority. And I think when something happens that doesn't really it might be like a headline in the news one day, but like but most people are going to be like, oh right, yeah, I think I heard of that happening, because it doesn't affect them personally. And
Mhm.
so I think it's gonna I really think honestly that I think it will. So I guess there's nothing like that will keep me from saying this for some reason, but like I think it will get worse. I think it will happen against like St. Patrick's. I think like it'll happen against like St. Patrick's in New York City, and that's when people will start taking notice. Like something like big, something where a billion, Catholics are affected by it around the world, in one of the
Like a
world's.
terrorist attack on the Vatican or something like that?
I mean, yeah, because that's what it took for the violence in the 70s and 80s to stop. It took John Paul II being
Yeah.
shot and then forgiving his shooter, and that's what stopped it. But it was a sport for a while in the 70s and 80s to blow things up, to kidnap people, to target major figures. There were two attempts against Gerald Ford of all people, like
Yeah.
Mr. Controversial, I guess, but as a figure of the American government, and so I think it's I like feel really terrible to say this, but I think it will get worse, and I think that it's gonna take like something really big, because people aren't paying attention to like kids being shot in school. People aren't paying much attention to, when it's like very politicized. Occasionally it's like, yeah, we're against this like particular church shooting for this particular reason, but mostly it's like yesterday's news already. Yeah, which is terrible. It's
Yeah.
like, it's not, but I don't think it's done yet.
Well, that's a sobering thought, but we are taking security more seriously at our congregations, and people are watching, and we're still friendly. And we welcome visitors, but we'll be watching for you know those who come to our meetings with ill intent and try to be prepared. Um,
Yeah.
so the other, speaking of yesterday's news, the big story has been the end of hostilities in between Gaza and Israel. The war coming to
Yeah.
an official end.
Yeah.
Um, and what are some of your thoughts? I mean, we've debated on this channel, maybe not you and I, but Eddie and I have with several people about the conflict while it was ongoing, and how just using common sense, we were very skeptical of all the claims Hamas was making. The,
Right.
the, that for the common man, Hamas did not come off credibly. We felt like the Abraham Accords, right? That Saudi Arabia was just about to recognize Israel and open up diplomatic relations, at the time of this attack. It all felt, the claims of oppression rang hollow, because the reason their attack was so successful is that Israel had withdrawn all their troops, and so their bases around Gaza were basically empty, maybe one person there to keep the lights on, right? And so they weren't being actively oppressed, and they took that opportunity to immediately attack Israel, right? And in a very brutal, savage way, a way that's sort of disqualifying um, for them to be taken seriously as a, um,
Political.
in a lot of ways. So now, right? So we've debated that. So, but now, after 2 long years of war, Gaza is in a much worse state than it was before. Um, but they have come to finally agree to try to surrender, right? All right, they gave up all the hostages, all the living hostages. Um, Supposedly today, they gave up all the bodies that they had access to of deceased hostages, and agreed to a task force to try to uncover other hostages. Um, what are some of your thoughts about this war now that it's coming to an end? Do you feel like peace between Gaza and Israel um, is achievable?
Well, oh my gosh, what a loaded question.
Yeah,
These
right.
achievable. Well, yesterday, yeah, I guess counts. So, 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 like, is that forgetting that Hamas is a terrorist organization, or what?
Yeah. Well,
Yeah,
Hamas, the terms of it long term, right? Obviously, everything can't happen like that, but the Hamas is supposed to be required to completely demilitarize and disarm themselves
yeah,
and cease being that. Now, today, we did see the Hamas being out in the streets openly carrying and even executing Palestinians that were accused of being Israeli collaborators,
yeah,
i.e.,
right,
anybody that opposed them or would potentially start a opposing political party, they can bring out and be shot. But
yeah,
the day Hamas is weakened, I think in a couple of fronts. One, that the biggest supporter, Iran and Hezbollah, Syria, are not nearly as strong as they were 2 years ago,
right,
and so they don't have that type of network of support. Um, and so militarily, and the consequences have been so bad for Palestine that they are not their support within Gaza. Ultimately, enough responsibility fell upon them for the consequences. Their popularity
mhm,
in Palestine is supposedly much less. Now they can hold on to power brutally, right? Which is what it seems to be they're trying to do. But ultimately, they're supposed to withdraw from being the governing authority in Gaza. If that happens, you think there'll be peace? If another organization can rise up and replace Hamas? Or will they
boy,
be sort of like West Berlin after they were still Nazi officials, but now they weren't part of the Nazi party? Like if
right,
you right
yeah. I think so.
if you
So I'm
change
gonna
the
answer.
name?
Well, I think the answer's a lot. To, so I think the answer is a lot to do with the economics of Germany versus the economics of Gaza.
Okay.
Um, so like Germany had a leg to stand on, economically speaking, even though like East Germany never did nearly as well as West Germany, and they're still suffering to this day for having been communist East Germany. But economically speaking, um, and Gaza has never had that, and I really wish. So like this fight against Israel, I wish like like let's just say like okay, we understand they have a beef with Israel, fine. What are you going to do about it? Like, why not strengthen your relationships with your neighbors? So like occasionally I would see it mentioned that Egypt had closed their border with Gaza as well. It wasn't just Israel that was not allowing the Gazans in like entry into their country. It was Egypt as well, and Egypt at one time pumped chlorine gas into the tunnels so that they would make it like abundantly clear that they did not want fighters coming into Egypt through the tunnels.
Mhm.
And they've just offered no help, no like um anything to the Palestinians in Gaza. So why not? So why is it Israel that has to like do the hand holding for the Gazans? Like they don't want them to. So nobody really seems to want that relationship. So why not strengthen the relationship with Egypt or Jordan, which is Israel's the size of New Jersey. Like it's a quick flight. It's probably like a half-hour flight over to Amman or something like that. Like it doesn't their isolation doesn't 100% make sense just in terms of Israel. Like
Well,
even like
yeah.
considering blockades and even considering like who's controlling the sea border and stuff like that, and walls and whatever, it's uh like diplomatic relations, where are they? And the Egyptians and the Jordanians fear the Palestinian Muslim Brotherhood arms,
Mhm.
and so they have a strong anti-Palestinian leadership. because of that, and perhaps for good reason. So like why, but like I don't know, they just at one point have to say to themselves, we need a friend, in the neighborhood. If it's not going to be Israel, like we need to figure out like not how not to be like these destitute people who are like just at, I don't know.
Well, I will tell them. Here's how you learn how you be not destitute. If you're listening in Palestine, no corruption from your government officials, right? Don't allow that. Don't accept that, right? And live peaceably with your neighbors, right? You are weaker militarily than Egypt and weaker militarily than Israel. Israel is not interested in conquering you. They just want to live in peace next to you. Just do that, and then you can prosper. There's no reason for you to still make it like your whole raison d'etre to like as soon as you get two bullets together to all right, let's go attack Israel. Like
It doesn't
that's not
make
that's
sense
not
because,
a recipe for prosperity.
well, the it's a recipe for an overwhelming response, which is what they get, and then it makes the world not want to be friendly with Israel, except that the Abraham Accords are
Yes.
like, like it's like, yes, clearly in the Middle East, their Israel's neighbors have an interest in allying to some degree with Israel.
Yeah.
So that's the way it is. So, and what leg do you have to stand on if like, what's your negotiating position of like, well, Israel took our land. Well, how are you going to get it back? Like the world's just going to turn their back on Israel, and
No.
then like, has that ever worked in the history of the world? Like like South Africa, became like, stopped apartheid, but that's not the same as like they just gave all their land back to like the Bantu people that like that were there before, like, so it's just I think it's a weird position. I think it's like slightly demographically related, just because there's like a ton of young men who like don't have good employment prospects. You see this all the time, um in the Middle East. Whenever like all the Arab Spring stuff, it was like young people that didn't have good employment prospects, and now they're like in their 30s and sipping espresso and going to work, so it's like they're not having revolutions anymore. But I guess the I don't know, it's just I feel like the answers that were given, oh, Israel's so bad, or like
No.
or like even like the Palestinians are like, uh I don't know, just like terrorists at heart or something like that. Like that, like, or it has something to do with Islam. I feel like those sorts of answers touch on something, but it's not the whole story, and it
Yeah.
just like, so a lot of it doesn't make sense to me.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think Saudi Arabia has shown with the Abraham Accords they would rather live in Israel as Muslims under Israeli government than in Gaza under Hamas rule, right? The 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 Arabs who live in Israel, Muslims who live in Israel, live better, right, than the Muslims who live under Hamas. And the willing to normalize everything against everything with Israel because they're not corrupt. They don't. Right. The time that Jordan took a bunch of Palestinians, it totally destabilized their country. Right. And
Yeah,
so they
right.
shipped them off. Right.
Like,
And
like,
so Saudi Arabia and others don't want to bring in Palestinians because of how destabilizing they are. And
yeah,
we've got Abbas, even the West Bank, the government was so corrupt that Abbas resigned because of corruption. No one stepped up to lead in his absence. And that Israel, right? The Arabs that accepted Israel as a legitimate country, Arabs can now go and live in Israel as long as you just are not trying to destroy Israel, as long as you just accept Israel as a legitimate country and then get all the benefits of a non-corrupt government. Now, I'm not saying that Israel's government is perfect, but it's not corrupt to the level that Hamas and the Western West Bank, I forget the name of Abbas's government was. but right, they're not. They're trying to use a rule of law,
the
much
Palestinian
more
legal order.
westernized,
Yeah,
much more standard, and that's what Saudis and I think even the Kuwaitis, obviously, like the United Arab Emirates, and maybe even the Iraqis, and certainly the Turks are ready to normalize relationship with Israel, right? And maybe even Syria, now that Assad is out of power, will finally, be if things can settle down there, be willing. I don't know about Lebanon, um, but but Persia, yeah, obviously Iran's going to always be antagonistic. But if the closer neighbors are ready to normalize Israel, then that'll be a big step towards peace, lasting peace in the
yeah.
Middle East.
Well, right, and they need to. I mean, like this is so many years in the making too, and they're
Mhm,
just looking at how the cards are laying, I guess, because
mhm.
it's not that they're happy, it's not that
Yeah,
they're like they
yeah,
um I guess don't quote me on this, but my understanding is that like in Islam there's a principle that any land that has ever been conquered by Muslims needs to forever and always remain in Muslim hands. And
mhm,
so like like so let's like Spain, is anybody trying to get Spain back? I
mhm,
don't,
yeah,
but so this is something that uh oh, I can't remember his name. He's Israeli. He talks about all the time, like this is religiously motivated, and a lot of reasons. And I'll say like it's a principle in Judaism as well, that this is like the Holy Land, and it's like God gave it to Jews. Now, how are you going to argue with either of those things? Because those are religious like things that God said, And so anyway, so but when you're like when you're talking about like just like realpolitik, I guess, like you cannot just like scrape Israel off the map. And I think like finally, and it's taken a really long time, like other countries are saying, well, we're not going to scrape Israel off the map, so better just get along, and it's
yeah,
not so bad having a technologically advanced neighbor on our side.
yeah. Israel's not going ever anywhere. Saudi Arabia acknowledges that. Jordan acknowledges that, um, and um,
Well,
the
Egypt is,
Palestinians aren't ready. I felt like the Great Britain and France, trying to recognize Palestinian statehood was premature because there's no official government. Who are you going to set up diplomatic relations with? There's
if
no
I
one officially to talk to.
I mean, I know like they meant it in goodwill,
Yeah,
because there's been a lot of pushback against it, of like, well, this isn't fair because like this is like legitimizing what Hamas did. But I'm going to say, if I was Palestinian and they said, oh, we're going to recognize you as Palestine now, I would feel like that was a slap in the face a little bit, because like what land, what government, what
well,
currency, what anything, like, it's like where is Palestine? Like
yeah,
I would be like, like, get me some borders, like you
yeah.
can't just get up
Well,
there and
yeah.
like make people happy and be like, oh, there's a Palestine now. Like it's just a like a real it's like cruelly political.
Well, I saw a Muslim moderate who essentially with the Saudis was saying we need to normalize relationships with Israel. Israel's not going anywhere. Quoted from the Quran, he's like, "Where did Jacob live according to the Quran?" The Quran says Jacob lived in Israel. They don't say that Jacob lived in Palestine because Palestine is a Roman word, right? The Quran
Right.
calls it Israel, right? And and Palestine is a Latin word. There's no P sound in Arabic, right? So right you know the claims, right, if they claim right of conquest, well then Israel has right of conquest too, right? The right of conquest is just about, now this is where the Marxists lose their minds, because any colonial or westernized technological power, right, has to be the oppressor, has to be the villain in the Marxist playbook, and so they can't under any circumstance approve of Israel and will discount or make excuse for any behavior, no matter how vicious or brutal or savage or inhumane action that Hamas or the Palestinians take. And I had this debate with somebody, and I asked them, I'm like, imagine if the military power dynamic was reversed and the Gazans had overwhelming military power and Israel had, just hard scrabble guerrilla fighters to defend themselves. Would Hamas use the restraint that they are requiring Israel to use on them? And he had the gall to say straight face, "Oh, I think they would," right? Um, right. Clearly, like Hamas, who's stated every day in the morning they get up and say, "I want to drive Israel into the sea and destroy it and wipe it off the map," um,
Yeah.
would not even agree to that. But their apologists or the Marxists say just because there's no virtue that they won't ascribe to the Palestinians and no evil they won't ascribe to Israel just because of how they see the victim and the oppressor dynamic. And
It's a really weird dichotomy where people have like pegged their I don't know, their virtues and their vices. And
yeah,
yeah, I feel like there's something like sort of metaphysical about it that always seems to be the case with the Jews, like the first, well, the religion is the reason that they're getting persecuted, and second, well, it's the race or the ethnicity or whatever the reason that they are getting persecuted, or it's their like, when we had like social Darwinism, like they it was just in their, like, they didn't have the word DNA yet, but it's just in their DNA to be like perfidious. So it's and so like this is just the new permutation of it. Well, let's not pay attention to Boko Haram in Nigeria. Let's not pay attention to Sudan and South Sudan. Let's not pay any attention to the enslavement going on in like Kenya and stuff like that. Let's let all Israel all the time.
Pakistan. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So it's very I guess strange, how much attention. And I think a lot, so I think like it's sort of that Israel has they translate stuff into English, and so
Okay.
it's accessible. And I think like I mean, Nigeria, they do speak English, it's their official language, but like, I think with a lot of things like in the Middle East that isn't that, like the Rohingya massacres in Myanmar for a while, like who speaks the languages of Myanmar that like,
Well, yeah,
you know,
that's why I'm saying you've got to get on X. The only way I see to be able to keep up on what's going on in Nigeria is through X because nobody else is reporting on it, right? The mainstream media aren't reporting on it, right? And to stay up on what's going on in Britain. Now, there is this religious component that Islam is feeling is using to justify any of their hostilities. And though the Saudis are trying to walk that back, it seems to be more of the Shiite or the Iranian backed Islam is being really antagonistic to the West. Um, and finally, and the West has been unwilling to sort of confront that. Um, uh, but now, right, some people are trying to deal with that and see that it's a threat and a danger to the
yeah,
West, and they're being
peaceful
treated
idiots, as
like
they
they're
say.
being attacked, right? They're saying that any type of statements that this militant Shiite Islam is dangerous to the West is just expressing that as terrorism and would get me imprisoned for me saying that in Great Britain, right? And so, we've seen these conflicts, right, where they're attacking Israel, or they say because they're Zionists or Israeli, but it's because of their Jewish, right, their Jewishness, right?
Yeah, well, and to be fair, I just want to put in that like
So,
there are people in Israel who believe in greater Israel similarly in concept to like the idea of a holy land that belongs to a certain religion. There are people who believe that like the West Bank, which is called Judea and
mhm,
Samaria, like traditionally by Jews, like that actually is more part of like greater, like the traditional Israel than like Tel Aviv. And so you
Mm.
do have people like that, and you do have people who are saying like, no, we really, it's a religious principle that we need to fight for greater Israel. um and so, and so then this is a question of like, in the real world, this involves like negotiation, or it involves like people dying because you're making warfare on them, and like how, just really how badly do you want that land. And so like I think like, I think I think in the West, I've heard this said a lot, and I agree with it, that like we don't really understand religious motivation that well, because we don't really, like, not maybe like every person in the West, but like it be as a principle, our Western Enlightenment values our reason and rationality, which I guess is the same thing, but like it's religious motivation for land. We see things as political, as national. We don't see land, like, because Christianity, which is the dominant religion of the West, doesn't have a land attachment. And so we don't recognize like Shinto having a land attachment, or we don't understand Judaism having a land attachment.
Shinto is Japan. I mean, it's emperor
Yes,
worship. Shinto
it's not right.
is
It's the
Osaka.
national religion
We
of.
we we see it. It's the middle what Nippon Osaka Island we would see is a Shinto land, right?
Shinto is the national religion of
Mhm.
Japan, and it's that sacred. There are sacred sites in
Okay.
Japan that belong to the Shinto religion, and so they celebrate them. And so if you were to like say Mount Fuji has no religious significance to like the people of Japan, like it does. That's
Okay.
what I.
Yeah. Oh,
Yeah,
okay. That's what you mean. Okay.
like
Yeah.
it's not just a mountain people hike up, it's like a religiously important symbol for them, and like place. So Christianity doesn't have that. And
Mm.
so when people think religion, well, the model is Christianity because that's the dominant religion in the West. And so like this attachment to land doesn't uh doesn't math, I guess.
Well, the Christians cared about Jerusalem. They had the Crusades. They tried to reclaim them from the Muslims, right?
Yeah, no, that's true. That's true. I'll give you that. And they've had like other, like the Vatican, I guess, is like, but I'm
Look at
not sure they
Rome.
go as far as to say like God gave this, its importance. Jerusalem's importance was where it's because of where Jesus died. It's
Mhm.
not, and I guess was born as well. No, he was born in Bethlehem. But anyway,
Mhm.
like so it's important because of what happened there. It's not that God said Jerusalem belongs to you. I don't think like it's the same thing.
Yeah. Well, yeah. But yeah, that's an interesting topic. We can talk about some more. We're coming up on our hour. I do I do want to say I feel like um peace, or if I wake up in a year and there's a newspaper headline or a report all over the internet about the tensions have inflamed and hostilities have broken out between the Palestinians and the Jews, I'm not going to be clutching my pearls in surprise. But I'm hopeful that if there is a way, if Hamas can actually be demilitarized and a legitimate, non-corrupt entity that is interested in actually governing Gaza and not trying to destroy people, and that this could be the beginning of it. There's still a long ways away. I was talking to somebody about it, and they brought up how America had bombed Japan, right, with the A bombs, and that was sort of the equivalent of Israel's destruction to Gaza. And I told them, right, which some historians that I trustfully greatly believe have reported that the understanding of the A bomb bombings in Japan is very different in Japan than what we would think it is. They saw it as, while destructive and a tragedy for the death, they saw it as an important part of humbling the military that had such a grip over the government to such a degree that they were finally able to give up control, right? And that that they became so humbled by the bombs. That was the only way the military was going to give up control of Japan and allow real democratic reform and a real chance to structure a government and a nation that could live peaceably with their neighbors. Right? They had to be humbled to such a degree, and I hope that, as tragic as this war has been, that if Hamas is humbled to a point where they're willing to demilitarize and be humbled, and that they can follow Japan's model of how to rebuild and live peaceably with their neighbors. And right, and I think of the scripture. It's Isaiah chapter 11, where Isaiah talks about, in vision, in the last days there'll be a road from Egypt to Assyria. Right? Imagine a highway from Egypt to Assyria, to Syria. Like, how amazing that would be, right? To live where there's peace, right? Where you could get in a car and drive from Cairo right through all the way to Assyria. But people are going to have to change. They're going to have to accept Israel is legit. It's not going anywhere, and that Israel just wants to live in peace. Right? It's not a hard ask, but I think it's difficult for us Westerners to totally appreciate the emotionality of this, of the people that live there, and the religious things involved. It is an emotional thing, but I hope, I'm hopeful that this will lead towards peace, and if it does, next year I think Trump would be a strong candidate for the Nobel Peace Prize.
I like your words.
Any disagreement? Anything else? Any other final statement you want to give?
No, let's hope for it. Peace in the Middle East.
Yeah, next year in Jerusalem. Thank you for coming on the show, and everybody, you stay common, and we'll see you next time on Common Mansplaining.